In the 1950s in Marcella, Nock is being chased by Lansky and his partner, who catch him and kick him a couple of times. Lansky tells Nock he shouldn't gamble if he can't pay, and that he expects to be paid in 24 hours. Since he doesn't have any money, Nock tries to think of a way to get out of this one and finds himself at the harbor, where a cruise captain is desperate to find a doctor for a 6-month trip to India. Nock doesn't have any qualifications other than a past in the army. But since the ship is about to set sail, the captain is desperate and accepts that Nock will pretend to be a doctor. Nock learns as much as he can from the medicine books he finds in the doctor's office. When they bring in a sick mechanic, the man explains he knows he has typhus because he's often seen it while sailing, and he's heard what treatments his co-workers used in the past. Pretending to test him, Nock makes the man repeat the treatment he's heard of as he writes it down, then tells him to do exactly that. Afterward, Nock goes for a walk on deck and sees a lady that has sunbathed for too long, making her face extra red. Nock implies she may have a skin condition, then leaves for the kitchen, where he takes some whale fat to make a fake ointment. When he gives it to the lady, he pretends it's a rare oriental ointment that even Cleopatra used. A few days later, the redness of the lady's face disappears naturally because it had only been a bad tan. But she thinks it's thanks to the ointment and is willing to pay any cost for more. After selling her 3 bottles at a crazy price, Nock checks on the mechanic, who is doing better too. The captain is amused at how well Nock's doing and wonders what he'll do after the trip, to which Nock answers he'll go to medical school. 5 years later, Nock arrives at the small village of St. Maurice, where he'll be taking over Dr. Parpalad's practice. Parpalad is moving to retire in the big city and wants to leave his office in good hands. So Nock assures him he studied to be a doctor after accidentally referring to the patients as clientele. The next day, Nock pays the mailman to go around town with an announcement. On Tuesday morning, he'll give every person living in St. Maurice a free consultation. Afterward, he goes to the local pharmacy to meet Mr. Musquit, whose business isn't doing well. Nock uses his charms to reach an agreement. They'll make people think they'll feel worse than they actually do and share the earnings. As the mailman delivers the announcement around town, gossip around Nock begins to spread. He's more elegant than what they're used to, but different is intriguing. However, Priest Lupus thinks a doctor that offers free consultations is suspicious and must be hiding something. Some hours later, the mailman goes to Nock for his payment and is approached by Adele to drop a letter, causing Nock to start developing an interest in her. Afterward, he gives the mailman his free consultation, already using his charms to convince him his stress has some hidden sources they're going to treat. In the afternoon, Nock goes to the local school to speak to Bernard, the headmaster, to scold him for not having health classes at school. He leaves him some material to teach the kids about hygiene, including some posters that may come off as creepy and scary to the kids because of their gritty illustrations. These posters are also hanging on the walls of Nock's office. So when Tuesday comes around, everyone is feeling quite uncomfortable while waiting. Nock's first patient is Adele's employee Cook, who feels well and only came because it's free. When Nock notices her yawning, he gives her a quick checkup and tells her to diet and rest for a few days before deciding on a treatment. At that moment, Lupus arrives at the office and scoffs at everyone for being here when they never are this eager to go to mass. After Cook leaves, he cuts in line and sees Nock next, intending to give him a piece of his mind. However, Nock quickly takes over the conversation, tells Lupus he has conjunctivitis, and sends him away with a prescription. When Cook returns home, she orders Adele to tidy up her room and get a second mattress. Nothing shall bother her while she rests. But when Adele coughs, Cook doesn't show the same worry for her health and tells her to stay silent. Next, Nock checks on the mailman, who is doing much better even if he realizes he needs to pay for this second consultation. Everyone in town is happy with Nock's work and impressed by his persona. Men think he's distinguished and smart. Women call him charming and handsome. And Lupus can't stop his jealousy. He's so popular that Elizabeth comes to see him just to gift him a basket of goods she baked herself and invites him to the mayor's dinner party, while trying to flirt. In the evening, Nock assists this dinner party, where rich widow Pons competes with Elizabeth to see who gets to flirt with the doctor more. Nock also takes the chance to invite everyone to the conference he'll be giving at the school the next day. In the morning, the classroom is filled with both kids and adults listening to Nock talk about the kind of illnesses that can be found everywhere. He calls Didier to the front to give a demonstration, pointing out how to discover bad signs inside the mouth. Fortunately, Didier is clean, and Nock congratulates him for his good hygiene, earning him a round of applause from everyone. Afterward, Pons sings Nock's praises, which makes Lupus rather angry. He reminds her that Nock's still very suspicious and urges her to help him find out whatever she can about Nock's past. Adele welcomes him and comments on how weak Lacouque has been lately because she hasn't left the bed and has been on a diet she doesn't need. However, she doesn't insult Nock for having played her boss like that. In fact, she calls him smart. Nock notices Adele coughs a lot and asks her to come to his office sometime, promising not to charge her. Afterward, Nock goes to Lacouque's bedroom and offers her an expensive treatment that she refuses to pay. Lacouque tries to convince him she's doing fine by doing some exercise, but that only makes her feel worse, causing her to give in and pay Nock whatever amount he asks for. A few days later, Nock visits Musquet for their monthly meeting. The pharmacy is doing much better now and Musquet is impressed by the money he's making. So he's hesitant to lose this when Nock comments on the chances of doubling their earnings. However, Nock uses his charms once again and gives him a speech about the two of them being the guardians of this town's health. Later, Nock's visited by Pons, who manages to get him to visit her 4 times a week to check on her health. She may be flirting, but Nock plays along because of the money that will bring. Pons also tries to ask some questions about his past, but Nock only gives her vague answers before dismissing her. His next patient is Elizabeth, who is desperate to beat Pont and takes off her coat to show Nock she isn't wearing any clothes. Her efforts are in vain though. Nock turns her down and asks her to leave. The night of the town's annual party, Nock notices Adele arguing with her fiancé and leaving the building in a huff, unaware that a newly arrived stranger is also sneaking in through the window. This stranger turns out to be Lansky, who has been traveling as a tramp. Lupus finds him stealing food and tries to call for help, but Lansky grabs him by the neck and threatens him into letting him stay in the church for a few days. Back to Nock. He takes his car down the road to offer a lonely Adele a ride. He scolds her for not wearing gloves and a scarf, but quickly apologizes when she mentions she isn't in the mood to be chastised. The two of them chat and bond on the way to her house, and Adele confesses she's broken up with her fiancé. She also claims to be the only one in town who knows why he's different. The next day, Adele comes to ask Nock for help with Lacouque's dog, Tom, since she can't take him to the vet because Lacouque will only pay for the animals that give her money, like the cows and sheep. Luckily, Tom's only dislocated his shoulder. Thus Nock's able to quickly put it back into place, while Tom gets to run around again. Nock confesses he had been jealous of Adele's fiancé, so she asks him to dance with her right there to the rhythm of the birds singing. Sometime later, Lansky sees Nock in town and recognizes him, wondering what's going on. Nock has come to pick Musquet up to start a new project at the local hotel, and Lansky sees it all. After telling Lupus he'll stay 1 more week, he goes looking for Nock to ask for money. At first, Nock isn't afraid of him and pays him double the money he owed him. However, this isn't enough for Lansky and begins bribing Nock, asking for a big amount of money in exchange for keeping his secret. Adele doesn't show up for her date with Nock, so he goes to Lacouque's house, who asks him for a new prescription before confessing Adele has been in bed sick for 4 days. Yet when Nock wonders why he wasn't called, Lacouque says she didn't see a reason because she was feeling better. Nock rushes to check on Adele and worries when she sees the condition, causing him to send her to get some tests done at the city hospital. Before leaving, he leaves her a gift, a scarf with a pair of gloves. Unfortunately, when a few days later Nock gets the test results, they bring bad news. Adele has tuberculosis. Nock calls a friend in a specialized clinic to ask for treatment for Adele. He also promises to pay for it and requests his friend to keep it a secret from her. Later, Nock goes to the bar, and everybody falls silent when Lupus begins pointing out more people are sick now than ever. The bartender apologizes, pointing out that Lupus is just angry because nobody goes to church anymore since they're more concentrated on their health. But Nock doesn't let it bother him. Afterward, Nock takes Adele to the bus station and says goodbye to her. Elizabeth's in the area and sees them kiss. Feeling bitter, she rushes to the church to ask for confession. She tells Lupus an exaggerated version of what she saw and how warm it made her feel. She also lies about the day she went naked to the doctor's office and pretends Nock took advantage. Lansky notices how eager Lupus is to get bad gossip about Nock, and after Elizabeth leaves, he offers to tell Lupus some things about Nock's past in exchange for money. The next day, Nock goes to check the hotel, which is being transformed into the village's first clinic. He learns that Lansky is there renting one of the last rooms left, and finds him cleaned up and armed. Nock gives him the money he asked for, but Lansky grabs it only to ask for more, this time an even more insane amount. Meanwhile, Lupus goes to see the mayor to tell him Nock took advantage of Elizabeth and corrupted Adele into leaving her beloved hometown. However, the mayor doesn't fall for it. He already knows Adele was sent to a clinic, and points out Elizabeth is always taking her clothes off for people, including the mayor himself. Some days later, Nock receives a letter from Adela, who is very comfortable in the clinic and feels lucky to have met him. That night, Lansky comes over for his payment, so Nock promises he'll take out the money from the bank the next day. To seal the deal, Nock invites him to toast with whiskey, and Lansky takes it without knowing the doctor tampered with it. The next day, Lansky is suffering from such an awful case of diarrhea that he sullies many of the floors and walls of the hotel. Nock goes to check on him and pretends Lansky's terribly sick, so he promises to help after Lansky gives him back his money and signs a letter confessing all his past crimes. Some weeks later, Parpalad comes back to the village to see how it's doing, and he's shocked to see the finished clinic, not understanding the need for it. Next, he goes to see Nock and is even more shocked to hear he has 600 consultations a month. Parpalad points out the poor morals behind this method, causing Nock to begin a speech about the way medicine is reaching the common people that annoys Parpalad into leaving. Nock visits Adele and she sweetly tells him the two of them aren't so different after all because they grew up poor. Unfortunately, a few days later, Nock receives bad news. Adele has died. Overwhelmed by grief, he destroys his office. During the funeral mass, Lupus says Adele died because she put her life in the wrong hands and mentions Nock's former gambler and thief. Furious, Nock admits having done bad jobs to survive, but he worked hard to become a doctor when he had a chance. After insulting Lupus for bringing this up in the middle of a funeral, Nock leaves, and the townspeople immediately jump in his defense, also calling out Lupus for having interrupted such a solemn occasion with these matters. Meanwhile, Didier follows Nock to his house and notices he's packing his things up. The kid runs back to the church to tell the townspeople that Nock is leaving for good, so everyone comes to an agreement. They don't care if Nock isn't an actual doctor or is a criminal. He's made their lives better. Ignoring Lupus' pleas, everyone rushes out to the streets to surround Nock's car and ask him to stay. La Cook even confesses she got a letter from Adele saying she wanted him to have Tom, which means Nock should stay in her honor. When even a man that used to stutter begs him to stay with perfect speech, Nock cries and promises the Adele that lives in his heart that this will be his permanent home.